Good afternoon, Commissioner.
Is your green button on?
I think it is. It's on now. Are you guys screen buttons on? Okay. All right. Good afternoon, Commissioners. Joy Bivens, Director of Franklin County Department of Job and Family Services.
Christy Russell, Assistant Director, Chief Financial Officer.
And Laura Reposkey, Chief Operating Officer.
Can we begin?
Go for it.
Okay. I'm going to try to float through this so Commissioner Boyce doesn't have any questions. So,
I was gonna start off before you
I
said
know
it.
you were. I felt it.
He announced before you got here
heard.
that he had questions for JFS. No, I mean, he already stated that, so
Yeah.
you're,
Right, yeah, I did, didn't I? I already said that.
Maybe if I talk fast enough, he won't catch it. So, are you ready, Commissioners? Okay. The Franklin County Department of Job and Family Services 2020 proposed budget is $92 million. This recommended budget includes $43.3 million, which is 47% in personal services and fringe benefits to support our dedicated staff. Our staffing level target for 2019 is 625 full-time equivalents, or FTEs. We maintain staffing levels above 600 FTEs for the first 6 months and have been above 620, and as of November 12th, we have 632 full-time employees. Our recommended budget also allocates $9.8 million, which is 11% for materials, supplies, services, and a capital building lease, including $2.8 million for temporary staffing, a decrease from $3 million budgeted in 2019. The remaining $39 million, which is 42% of our recommended budget, is reserved for social service contracts and programs to directly assist our most vulnerable residents. I, along with our Chief Operating Officer, Laura Reposkey, and our Chief Financial Officer, Christy Russell, will be happy to address any questions you may have regarding the recommended budget, funding streams, or staffing levels. However, I would like to use this testimony to highlight some of the innovative social service programs the Board of Commissioners funds. In 2018, the Department of Job and Family Services went through the most significant transformation in decades with the conversion from the Christy system, the more than 30-year-old legacy eligibility system, to Ohio benefits. We overhauled our business operations and enhanced customer accessibility with features like virtual hold, scheduled callback appointments, and text alerts. These new systems also granted us access to a wealth of new data and information. This year, we have used this data to enhance and inform our service delivery approaches and provide further context and nuance to the mission of your Rise Together Franklin County Blueprint to reduce poverty, and we will continue to do so in 2020. Our agency touches the lives of a quarter of residents in our county. Over 310,000 residents receive Medicaid, more than 147,000 residents receive SNAP, and nearly 10,000 Ohio workforce customers. Additionally, over 29,000 children receive publicly funded child care. Through our Office of Strategic Transformation and Research, or STAR, we have been able to use administrative data to create geographical visualizations and heat maps. One way we've used this data is to display the locations of currently unrated child care providers and indicate which providers service the highest number of children receiving publicly funded child care. This way, we can be more targeted in our approach to getting providers rated by the July Step Up to Quality 2020 deadline. I'll be diving much more into that later of this testimony. Additionally, STAR has matched the internal benefits figures with publicly available data to create zip code profiles for Franklin County. These profiles can highlight where our clients live and which services may be lacking in their neighborhoods. In the future, we may use this geographic information to help allocate our limited outreach services to the areas with the greatest need. STAR has also led the development and piloting of the web-based screening tool that identifies those at risk of homelessness and connects them to the appropriate resources. The last pilot phase will be complete in the first quarter of 2020, and there is a great interest in using the tool for the general population's specific homeless prevention efforts next year. We also oversaw a marked increase in utilization of our Prevention, Retention, and Contingency, or PRC fund, our emergency assistance program to help stabilize families on the edge of homelessness. Our federal fiscal year 2019 We paid over $2.5 million in PRC benefits, a 40% increase from fiscal year 2018, and a twofold increase from the average expenditures from the preceding years. And if I can pause real quick right here, Commissioners, just so if you remember, we did a community conversation with providers working with those who are at the risk of being evicted or homeless. We got their input, and we revamped our PRC plan so that the PRC plan was relevant to the needs of the community. We increased the cost or the baseline ask for the customers. I believe that the housing cost at the time was $1,000. We increased the average application to $1,500, and we also allow customers to ask for more than one item on that application. Before, it was just one item that you can ask for in that application. So when we talk about a 40% increase, that is actually a good thing, because in years past, we have never been able to spend down our PRC dollars.
Can I stop and ask a question?
Yes, ma'am.
Would that get you off?
No, ma'am.
With the PRC 71.9% going to rent. With the 71.9% going to rent in PRC that I see here, do we know if people are being kept from being evicted after we help them with that rental payment? Do
So-
we have any sense that that really helps get them over that one-time, with that one-time payment? Does that help them from being evicted?
So Commissioners, at this point in time, we are not able to say that we know that does help the one-time assistance, but we
Right.
don't know if the
Correct.
crisis comes up again. We have been having internal discussions on developing a tracking system so that we can track the customers post interaction with our agency for PRC.
Okay,
Because there needs to be a tracking mechanism
Yes.
post
Post
the assistance,
that.
so that we can track them in the community. Because as you know, you can only ask for PRC for one time.
I know that.
Yeah.
And I wonder if after that month, what
Right.
we can find out
Right.
for the next month, what happens. If
Yes.
there's a way to track that, that would be the most helpful, so that we know the help really helps.
Absolutely.
And doesn't just delay a month.
Absolutely. Right. And that was one of the concerns going into this, yes.
Yeah, okay, thank you.
You're welcome. Over 90% of our approved requests and total expenditures went towards housing for utility assistance, helping families stay in their homes and avoid eviction. This year, we also continue to leverage inter-county fund transfers and allocation redistribution opportunities with the state. The flexibility provided the Board of Commissioners and relationships being established amongst counties assist Franklin County Department of Job and Family Services with optimizing every dollar. In 2019, these efforts played a significant role in eliminating the need for general fund subsidy. As federal fiscal year 2019 comes to a close and throughout the federal fiscal year 2020, we plan to leverage these opportunities further in support of community programs in alignment with the Franklin County Blueprint Plan to reduce poverty. I want to take this opportunity to speak more about the blueprint to remind the public of the process that went into developing its 13 goals and 120 action steps. When you tasked me with leading the development and initial implementation phase of the blueprint, you made it clear that this cannot be just another academic study. Administrator Wilson told me to remove the word report from my vocabulary. With that in mind, we started last year by going to residents. Our team conducted more than 20 focus groups with over 200 residents, many living in poverty. Groups included veterans, new Americans, mothers with children in Head Start programs, staff at OSU East Hospital, incarcerated and restored residents, young people, seniors, and other human services providers. We wanted to understand the problems as they defined them, not prescribe policy solutions as we saw fit. Their feedback identified 4 priority areas: increased access to high-paying jobs, stabilizing housing for families near or below the poverty level, improving physical, mental, and behavioral health and overall well-being through increased access to care, utilization of services, and social connectedness. ensure all young people are on task for long-term success. They also identified a pair of issues that cut across all 4 of those areas: transportation and systemic racism. The feedback from these residents sped up to work groups made up of social service practitioners, subject matter experts, and researchers that developed and refined action steps to feed up to our steering committee. Eventually, the steering committee arrived with 13 goals, with more than 120 short and long-term action steps, as well as several ideas for the Franklin County community to work collectively to disrupt poverty. We released the blueprint in June and immediately began to work on implementing it, both within our agency and throughout the county. I gave my staff directive that our temporary assistance for needy family contracting strategy for fiscal year 2020 and beyond must align with the blueprint. We began evaluating our existing contracts and reassessing our procurement processes to reflect our new priorities. We were candid with our community partners heading into the new contracting period that we would have to make difficult but necessary decisions around funding. That is why, when I or others from the executive team bring a resolution to you, we are explicit about how program supports the blueprint, and we will continue to be. However, we also acknowledge that, as the largest funder of social services in the county, we must also commit to providing opportunities for community partners to build capacity to support strategic alignment with the blueprint. Now I'd like to pause for a moment to go more into detail about ongoing strategic initiatives where we're bringing together a broad cross-section of partners to support the blueprint, Step Up to Quality, and Summer Youth Portal internships. Whether through research and analysis conducted by Kirwan Institute and our STAR office, or through the words of dozens of working families we spoke with, the importance of publicly funded childcare became more and more paramount. Childcare costs continue to rise. They're up more than 70% since 1985, while earnings have more or less remained stagnant over the same period. Far too many working families are spending as much as a third or more of their income on childcare costs. Publicly funded childcare, or PFCC, has the dual impact of enabling parents to work or attend school to support their families, while providing children with the foundation heading into kindergarten. Families must make below 130% of the federal poverty level, a little more than $2,300 a month for a single mother with 2 children, in order to initially qualify. Center or home-based providers must be licensed by the state in order to accept PFCC subsidies. However, starting next year, childcare providers will also need to obtain a Step Up to Quality star rating to participate in PFCC. As you know, Step Up to Quality is a 5-star quality rating improvement system for childcare providers administered by the Ohio Department of Education and the Ohio Department of Job and Family Services. The Ohio legislature has mandated that all childcare providers obtain at least 1-star rating by July 1st next year. When we first conducted an analysis of the Franklin County PFCC landscape in 2017, we found that only about a quarter of PFCC providers were rated. That meant as many as 23,000 children and 10,000 working parents were at risk of losing access to childcare when the mandate goes into effect. It won't surprise you to learn that 68% of those children were children of color in many of the lowest asset neighborhoods in our county. Neighborhoods like Hilltop, Far East, Linden, and Milo Grogan. Nearly 3/4, which is 72% of all payments, were going to unrated providers. Franklin County has been and remains thoroughly committed to the mission of Step Up to Quality. We believe that every child deserves high-quality, star-rated early learning, and that is precisely why we have committed more than $2.5 million towards implementing the Step Up to Quality standards since 2015. That includes $870,000 investment in 2019 to optimize our child care department to meet new state requirements, support ongoing community outreach, and continue to offer free training for providers to become star rated. Our child care department has traditionally been responsible for making licensure recommendations for home-based providers. However, in 2019, It took on the added responsibility from the state of processing 1 to 2-star step-up quality applications for home providers. We worked to restructure our department accordingly, leveraging data to increase the staff knowledge and capacity, strengthening community partnerships, reconfiguring workflows to better meet the new demands of the Step Up to Quality star rating and streamline the rating process, and expanding engagement and communication with providers and parents around the importance of high-quality childcare. To date, our childcare department has processed 162 Step Up to Quality registrations, and nearly 90% have been approved by the state and receive a star rating. Additionally, our childcare department has partnered with the state, Action for Children, and Future Ready Columbus on an array of initiatives, from ongoing caseload management meetings to unrated provider outreach events. They have also hosted 6 provider informational sessions at local libraries across the county, providing technical assistance and resources to assist with implementation of corrective action plans, reviewing licensing rules, and of course, Step Up to Quality, including referrals to our free training. As you know, our training, which is approved by the Ohio Child Research and Referral Association, also known as OCRA, covers all 4 modules of the Step Up to Quality module process: learning and development, administrative and leadership practices, staff qualifications, professional development, and family and community partnerships. We know that many unrated providers may already be providing high-quality care. They just may not realize they're meeting the Step Up to Quality standards, or may be intimidated by the burdensome paperwork, or just feel their time is already too strained from the day-to-day work of caring for early learners and operating their businesses. That is why we offer flexible in-person and online training options, as well as one-on-one assistance to cover all the content they need, from a 1-star rating to a 5-star rating, and earn 32 hours of free professional development that can go towards the biennium training requirements. We first began offering our training in earnest in July of 2018. Since then, more than 390 center and home childcare providers have completed our Franklin County training, and 212 of those have obtained a star. That's a little more than 43% of all rated providers in the county in a span of 16 months. I'm going to read that one more time for the public. That is more than 43% of all rated providers in the county in a span of 16 months. As of last month, 68% of PFCC children are in star-rated care. Between our November and December and training cohorts, as well as the dozens of providers who have applied for a star rating and are waiting on a state approval, we believe we will have flipped the paradigm, with 3/4 of children in a star-rated programs heading into 2020. While this is significant, it's no cause for celebration, not until all children are in star-rated care. That is why we are ramping up our efforts in heading into the new year. We now have a dedicated staff member who has been going door to door to the largest unrated centers to share resources about Step Up to Quality and register for training on the spot. Since September, he has visited 70 centers in the highest priority neighborhoods and is working with Action for Children to ensure there is no wrong door for providers seeking assistance. With the state directive with that state directive, providers should have their applications in by March 1st to ensure that they can be rated by July 1st. It is all hands on deck. So we are also engaging with partners like Community Development for All People, the National Panhandle Council of Columbus, to amplify our message. While we remain laser focused on the July 1st deadline, we also recognize the need for a shared long-term community vision around birth to 5 education. However, the blueprint also requires us to look at early childhood education not as a silo, but as a part of an ongoing continuum of care for young people. Work readiness is another crucial component of that continuum. In the lead up to the release of the blueprint, we met with the leadership from the business community, including Columbus Partnership President and CEO Alex Fisher, to help solicit their buy-in for the blueprint. As you know, The business community has been and must remain an invaluable strategic partner in implementing the goals and strategic steps. One particular area where their collaboration is most critical is in the area of developing our future workforce. While the partnership was supportive of our joint county-city challenge to employers to hire youth for the summer of 2019, it also highlighted the need for a centralized location or clearinghouse for both young people interested in summer internships as well as prospective employers. Commissioners, you charged us with convening representatives from the Workforce Development Board of Central Ohio, Education Services Center of Central Ohio, the City of Columbus, local school districts, and other community stakeholders to begin planning for summer of 2020 and beyond. Our consultant, T Street, Education Program Director of Partners Achieving Community Transformation, has helped facilitate processes and build consensus around the new summer youth internship model. Among other elements incorporated in this youth internship portal will be employer needs assessment, as well as screening, work readiness training, and wraparound supportive services for youth. We will leverage the Naviance platform, a college and career readiness tool that is already being used by all Franklin County public school districts, to connect young people 16 and older who are low income with employers offering paid summer internships. While this year will be considered a pilot, we believe this program and the partnership we have fostered to build it can become a nationally recognized model. Even with the portal in place for summer 2020, we know that many employers are hesitant to hire anyone younger than 16 for internships. However, the cutoff age for attending our funded summer camps are at 13. And with our Achieve More and Prosper comprehensive case management program focused on youth 16 to 24, we knew we needed to provide a different kind of opportunity for 14 and 15-year-olds. As a result, we are also investing $1 million to support project-based learning experiences for TANF-eligible 14 and 15-year-olds. Franklin County, let alone JFS, cannot carry out the work of the blueprint alone. The blueprint is the people's plan. We needed other local governments, the business and nonprofit communities, school districts, higher education, community residents, and leaders to create the blueprint. And also, and all of us are going to have to work collectively together to move the needle. However, it requires an entity driving the work, the Innovation Center. The Innovation Center will be responsible for convening community partners, aligning systems, and implementing the blueprint. Just as importantly, it will be tasked with considering and vetting big ideas to disrupt poverty and increase economic mobility. To that end, we will continue to work with your appointed leadership council to determine the organizational and governance structure for the Innovation Center through 2020. We're especially committed to furthering the work around racial equity already underway. We know that structural and systemic racism are underlying conditions within the challenges of addressing poverty. We can see that by looking at how African Americans are disproportionately represented on our program rolls, on top of a myriad of social economic indicators, from income and education attainment to infant mortality and incarceration rates. These facts are only further validated through the research conducted by the Kirwan Institute throughout the blueprint development process, and the testimonies of countless residents that we spoke with. We are grateful to you, commissioners, for your leadership on this front and for the opportunity for many of our agency's leaderships to undergo racial equity training. Over the coming year, as long as I am director, we will commit to keeping racial equity at the forefront of all of our decisions. In addition to looking internally at how we may be perpetuating unjust structures, we also will convene conversations with local nonprofits and community organizations that advocate for and conduct social justice and equity work. The goal will be to establish a shared county-wide framework for ongoing training, community conversations, and programming in the area of racial equity. We're not just preparing to enter into a new year, but a new decade. As our county continues to grow, Franklin County Department of Job and Family Services must grow and evolve with it. While change is never easy, especially for an agency that touches the lives of so many of our residents, we are fortunate to have leaders like you, commissioners, and the Rise Together Blueprint to guide us. We will be happy to answer any questions that you may have.
Thank you. Commissioner Boyce.
Start off with me, Director, and to your team and staff that are here today, thank you for the work that you do every day. I truly can't think of anything that we do more important than the work that your agency carries out, and I mean that sincerely.
You started with that again. Last year, you told every agency
Every
to come up here.
agency.
Hey, I'm not talking to you, Commissioner Grady. I'm talking to them. Leave O'Grady to just give me my word, my quote from last year. I was quoted you and said, he's on me today. I don't know why. I mean, look, your Browns won. Can you just give me a little bit of space? Yeah. But truly, the work you do is, I mean, we all know that. I mean, you represent, those who are most vulnerable, perhaps, even beyond the Office of Aging, because you have children and families. That being said, I want to make sure I understand everything that you're presenting first today. So you requested $94 million for your 2020 budget, correct?
Yes.
But you're being funded at an amount, the administration is recommending you're funding at $92 million. So roughly about $2.4 million or $2.6 million less than what you requested, correct?
Correct.
What's not being funded?
Well, there's a couple adjustments. So there was, I think, a standard adjustment reduction in healthcare because the increase went down from what was in the requested budget. So that was part of it. And then basically almost offset by that was additional funds for the increase to the $15 minimum wage increase to include that in our budget. But the largest decrease that you're seeing is the last several years we've asked for a general fund subsidy, which was $2.6 million in the 2020 budget, and we typically don't get that funded up front because it's as an as-needed basis, and so to not set aside general fund dollars that may not be needed, we do not get that built into our budget initially. And as Director Bivens said previously, we had budgeted that in 2019, and as it turned out, we did not need any of that, which is kind of the basis of our discussions with OMB and County Administrator Wilson to not budget for it if it may not be needed. So it's in there to balance our budget, but with our funding streams and our expenditures and our statistical, random moment sampling, how our funding works.
Great.
There are a lot of variables that come into play, and so it's kind of like a contingency for if we need it, and for the first time in 2019, we did not need any of it.
But at the core, what you're saying, I believe what you're saying is that, you're not reducing services.
Correct.
Even though and that's why I
Right.
want to know.
Right.
So,
We are
at the end of the
continuing
day, and I think someone, because remember, this document is available to the public, and so at the end of the day, we want to make sure the public understands we've not reduced one dime any of the services or programs that we offer. Just you've found a more creative way to carry out, and we've been fortunate enough with some of the work we've done with wellness and some of the other things to be in position to where it just didn't require the same kind of subsidy.
Right.
Am I saying that right?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
Perfect. Administrator Wilson, did you want to add anything to that?
You captured it all, Commissioner Boyce.
You were giving me that look like you wanted to add something.
No,
so,
you
okay.
captured it all.
Okay.
I will take a moment to publicly thank the fiscal staff and leadership of Franklin County Department of Job and Family Services for being able to make it through this fiscal year when it comes to an end without requiring a subsidy over and above the county's mandated share. That's a pretty significant accomplishment. The agency has become quite skilled at, it was mentioned in their testimony, at finding dollars from other counties and doing agency swaps and other things. But I will say that they know that as county administrator, I always have their back, most of the time. At the same time, they ask for a subsidy.
Always, most of the time.
Always most of the time.
They asked for a subsidy of $2.5 million, And as Assistant Director C.F.O. Russell points out, I say, come see the Board of Commissioners when we get to the point of knowing exactly what will be needed. We haven't because serving our residents is so critical. At no time during which we've had this situation in place where the need for a possible subsidy outside of their vacancy credit, which has been built upon a long-standing science of looking at the historical trends, they have not been told that they need to artificially suppress the number of employees that they have working at any given time. As Director Bivens pointed out, they're at 632 now, which is a comfortable place for them, and they're just right where they need to be.
I think he's telling you something.
Madam President, may I continue?
Sure.
Yeah. So the question I have, so you talked a lot about the Rise Together Blueprint.
Yes, sir.
Which, as you so appropriately stated, has been the focus of this Board of Commissioners. And there's probably not a day that goes by that we all don't have some level of conversation in the community and internally about it. But that leads me to an area that you touched on, but I wanted to focus on for a second, and that's the racial equity training. I have to admit that going into that training, I was a little skeptical of what that would be like and how impactful it was, only to come out and feel like it probably was one of the best trainings I have ever seen. And I thought it was very impactful. And you and I have talked since about really engaging that model at a deeper level. And so do you have, and I know you're working through, so I may be a little bit cart before the horse, but let me zero in on this part then. Are you prepared to carry on that work, the racial equity training, in your budget? Is it reflective of continuing that training and beginning to offer it to other agencies, other groups, and maybe begin to own our own model or something that where we can share and allow it to take on a life of its own here in Central Ohio?
So Commissioners, that is not allocated in our budget. I would need additional dollars to build that build that work. I would like to continue to work with Courtney Kerrigan going forward in working with the Kerwin Institute on what that large-scale framework looks like for this county. So we would need additional dollars because we did not allocate that in our budget.
Well, Madam President and Commissioner O'Grady, I would suggest that now is the time for us to look closely at what that looks like and make the adjustment. Even if we don't put it in the budget, at least if we're aware of it and we have the capability of calling the audible and applying it down the road, at least we kind of have a sense for what it is, because that work is just way too critical.
It
and that
is.
model was so crucial to be able to utilize. So let me just be the first to put that out there.
I would agree, and I tell you, in a past life, I did that kind of training work, and I didn't know what to expect, and it was the most impactful and very different model than I've ever seen and been through, and I learned so much.
Yeah.
And I would absolutely agree with you that we need to take a look at how we go forward with increasing what we're doing in the community.
Yeah. I know Commissioner Grady
Matt,
had asked.
yeah, I was just
about-
saying, Madam President, Commissioner Boyce, Administrator Wilson, I've had conversations with Director Bivens about the fact that we need to continue this. We've talked about in the education space. We've talked about in a few other instances. We need to, I know the city of Columbus would like to pursue a partnership here to some degree. We need to figure out how do we do this, how we fund this, but we need to continue this training. I think it's too critical, especially as we are pursuing the Rise Together Blueprint. I think it's too critical to what we're doing here, and I think that we need to figure it out.
Yeah. And I think you all, thank you, Commissioners, and thank you for the opportunity. I think you all need to be commended on being the leaders in stepping out on this work. when you talk about racial equity and systemic racism, many times people cringe when they hear those words. When we started this process, I sat before you in a session and I said, when we go through this poverty work, one of the indicators of poverty is going to be racism. And as a leader of this work, people are going to expect people that look like me to be the first person to speak up on those social issues. I will tell you, it has been very surprising how our community has been so embracing of this work, and not just people of color, but people who are Caucasian as well. And I don't think I've seen leadership as we've gone through NACO and other across the country, some of our other national conferences. I've never seen government leadership take a role and a stance as it relates to racial equity that you all three have in this community. So thank you for the opportunity.
Well, I appreciate that. We appreciate that. But we went through this work. The work identified racism as the leading problem. We then, as a board, stood up and said, because the work identified racism as a problem, we were going to address it. The racial equity training, to me, has been the most significant step forward in our ability to address that issue in this community. And I think that we should, for that reason, I think that we should continue to fund that. If we're gonna say as a board that we want to address racism in this community, I think that's the most significant tool that we have to address racism in this community is to not just have a few racial equity trainings and then say we've done something,
Right.
but to
Right.
take it into the community
Yeah, you
and to share the training with the community and to make a significant impact by doing that.
You can't, it's one of the things I was very well aware of in moving here to Columbus is that clearly racism exists here in Columbus, and nobody was talking about it. And for the very first time in my time here, people are willing not just to talk about it, but to address it in a productive way and get to some of the real core issues and go through the training necessary and go through the history, go through what needs to be gone through in that core training that this training goes through, that we all have some base knowledge that's similar, both those of us who are not of color and those of us that are, that we have the same base of knowledge that we're starting from, that we can then go forward together and start really working at the issues in a productive way. And I think that's where we need a real group of people that's much larger than we have right now to go through the training and really work on the issues together. And that's why I think this is so critically important.
I would say, well said to my colleagues, very well said. I have nothing to add to that other than to make two small points. One, for the public to understand, we're projecting, the census is projecting that Central Ohio is going to grow by over 1 million people over the next 20 to 30 years. Of that, the vast majority, over 50%, are projected to be people of color. And we've got to stay ahead of this and stay, I think, committed to the conversation to ensure that as we grow, that discrepancy between poverty and wealth does not continue to grow, and that the racial implications embedded in that are also not something that grows for that. That being said, Madam President and Commissioner O'Grady, this week, myself and co-chair Mayor Ginther hosted our Central Ohio Census 2020 meeting along with Deputy Administrator Akina Smith. And one of the things that we're strategically looking at is how we're competing to promote the census here in Central Ohio. I was in Commissioner Grady and I were recently with the large urban counties, and there were counties that shared that they have spent over $1 million to advertise for census advertising, and so that they can get people involved. Is your agency, do you have anything sort of allocated for census engagement appropriation? Because many of your residents are hard to count residents, and if you don't, maybe it's something that you should think about additionally, besides having census promotion materials in the materials that we pass out and around your agency. But if you don't, maybe it's something that we ought to really think about on a tactical and strategic level. And I'd ask maybe Deputy Administrator Keena Smith to chime in on that as well.
So to answer your question, we don't, Commissioner. Actually, I'm speaking at the Columbus Urban League tomorrow evening on a census panel, and I'm going to highlight where the highest number of our customers reside. Not that we don't focus on all residents, but we really want to focus on those concentration of pockets where you have the highest number of our customer bases so that they can be counted and structure our efforts around that. We do not have dollars set aside. I'm going to be working with our executive team. It's actually on one of my agenda items to talk to them next week about our work in trying to ensure that our customers get counted. And then our staff person who works on our Step Up to Quality in the community will also be our community person for the census as well.
Yeah,
Commissioner?
I'll just say that I'll use just one little statistic. I may get this a little bit wrong, so forgive me if I do, but it's something like for the minimum of $600,000 of marketing and focus on census is the minimum to get the right level of return. Maybe Deputy Administrator Keena Smith knows it better, but I know that we're falling short of what that minimum investment is to ensure that we get our fair share from the federal government post-census process.
Thank you, Commissioner, President Brown and Commissioners. Commissioner Boyce, you're absolutely right. Research is showing that there is a minimum needed of about $600,000 for basic outreach to the 300,000 Franklin County residents that have been deemed hard to count. So we are working on putting together some funding for that. And the Board of Commissioners has committed a certain amount of dollars to that, and we'll be strategizing about how we will be increasing that funding along with our partnership with the City of Columbus. Director Bivens is linked to that work, not only in her outreach as she talked about yesterday, but she also is a member of the African American subcommittee. And so, which is under the leadership of NAACP President Nana Watson. So we anticipate some conversations coming up with her directly about how we can leverage her outreach and her broad access to that community, which you so rightly said is at the core of hard to reach especially in the African American community, as well as several of the other subcommittees that we have. And you as chair know that we have about 30 subcommittees for hard to reach populations. So we have a lot of work ahead of us, but we do expect that Director Bivens and Job and Family Services will play a very, very important role in our work over the next few months.
And Madam President, keep in mind too that these are really one-time costs, not one time, but for the decade. This is our one shot to get it right. We are competing with states like North Carolina and Georgia from a population shift standpoint. And in Central Ohio in particular, it has a lot to do with our congressional representation, which impact our dollars in Washington. Sure. And right now, the way the third district is established, it really won't look that way after the new census because Central Ohio, Columbus has grown so much, you can't really fit Columbus into one district anymore. And so all of those things are going to be crucial in our count, in particular the undercounted is where there's a belief we can make the most sort of strive and compete with some of the other states as well as regions in Ohio that we've got to compete with for those funding levels.
The only thing I question is whether it should come out of department or agency budgets rather than board budget
That's a fair
or
question. Absolutely.
county
I agree.
budget generally. I don't think it should come out of an agency budget if we're gonna put a financial contribution in.
I
just
totally agree.
I don't think it should.
Where did the money come from the last time, Ken? Sorry.
President Brown, Commissioner O'Grady, Commissioner Boyce, we at this point in time have in the recommended budget I'm recommending to you today, it has an allocation of $100,000. That was the budget that was established at that point in time to be matched.
By the city.
I've been by the city of Columbus aimed at the hard to count population.
And
The
it
team
may
is
need
what-
to
it-
go up
it may
from
need to
there,
go up, so-
And I would be okay with that, but I think it needs to be looked at in terms of what really needs to be done, and I don't have a sense of that yet. And I'd like to have a better sense of what really needs to be done and what the census organization federally is putting in and where we fit in at the local level. But I wouldn't feel comfortable having an agency budget.
Let me just clarify too what I was suggesting, because I think you're 100% right. And by the way, the census falls under my committee at NACO too.
Right.
And so I'm
Right.
immersed in this conversation. But I was only suggesting your department exclusively because of the population you represent, and it's a population that we struggle to connect with the most. And so I'm thinking materials and different kinds of connections to that population as ways, and even I don't know. There just seems to be a logical connection between the agency. But I agree with Madam President Brown that it would definitely be a BOC. Let me also add that so the $100,000 was supposed to be from the county. The city was going to match, and then the mayor and I are going to raise another $100,000 from the private sector, so a total of $300,000. Then we learned that the numbers, it just wasn't going to be enough to move the needle. So there's no point of even doing $100,000 if you're not going to move the needle. And I talked to the mayor last week, and he had agreed that the city would step up and do more if we could do more. And then we would also begin to talk to the private sector about matches, so we can get to that minimal of $600,000 somehow. So that, and again, keep in mind that's the minimum, not the maximum. Maricopa County, for example, is doing $1 million. And they're one of the fastest growing counties in the United States.
Yeah.
And so they're really working aggressive. States like Texas and Arizona, all the southwestern states are growing so fast.
Sure.
And they're being so aggressive. Some of Texas will pick up 3 congressional seats, more than likely, just because of their growth boom. And so competing with them is difficult, but where we compete is with Georgia and North Carolina, and we're more on that track and rate. And so just, as the mayor and I talked, our strategy is to beat our subset, to get counted in our subset to where we're accurate and we can sort of challenge our funding levels against those marks.
One of the things I'm doing, though, commissioners, as I sit on this committee and even preparing for tomorrow, and excuse my lack of knowledge, I'm trying to figure out a way to articulate to our customer base what is at risk when they do not engage or not get counted, right? So we know the big thing is of not getting counted, but also, as a person who receives some type of subsidy, what is the impact to them? Because that is the connectivity or the reason why that they would engage.
Sure.
Because as you all know, there is a lack of trust when you start, we've been to the homeless, they don't
absolutely.
trust, different populations, homeless populations where you go in the camps, people of color,
Sure.
just people just don't trust when you go knocking on doors.
Madam President, Director, that's exactly where I was going when I was
Yeah.
suggesting sort of what a connection with you all,
Yeah.
because we've got to find a way to connect at a deeper level with that segment of our population. And I'm not sure what the answer is to that, and everybody's trying to figure it out nationally. And so if we can come up with something unique and strong for this region, we can actually do something that might, really be a model nationally that folks can look to. Because it's $1 million question for
Right.
everyone, trying to get their census numbers accurate.
Right, because there's formulas to receiving the benefits. So is that going to impact the formula of
It
Medicaid?
does.
Is that going to impact?
Yeah, it's
it-
gonna
and-
affect a lot of funding decisions.
So there's some kind of stat, Madam President, that says for every person not counted, it's about just a little over $1,200 toward what you would get in allocation for federal resources annually. And so, you could add that up if you got 100,000 undercount or 50,000 undercount, then, it can be meaningful resources that come to this region to support folks that may need it.
Yeah.
So I'm sure there's a way to tell that story and do it in a way we just haven't thought of yet.
We need
Madam
to,
President,
it's important, good points that have been made here. It's extremely important that these undercounted areas, get information to take away some of the fears, that are long held. We also had a senior population, that we need to make sure that they're counted. And by virtue of how the census is completed, there's difficulties there. We also, while the congressional district issue is very important, and all of the dollars that we draw down from Washington are extremely important, we need to make sure that our brother and sister counties are also all in statewide, because the statewide count is what is the most important as it relates to the congressional districts.
Were you able to get the models that, when you were in Miami, you and Commissioner Brady, the models or best practices at those counties that you have spoken to on that committee? Like, was there some best practices at those other counties?
You mean we were in Dade County? Yeah.
Yeah.
That was a joke. I was there. So the answer is no, because no one has figured it out. Everyone is trying, and it is the challenge of the day. Now, in 2020, 2019, the technology is vastly different than it was in 2010 or in 2000. And so now there's an expectation that the technology that exists today will allow us to be a little more accessible, a little more aggressive and creative and all of that. But that also there's a reduction in the sort of tchotchke promotion element of the sort of, that piece. And so they're going to rely more on technology. So it's one of those things where we've got to think very deeply about what our own strategy is. And that's why what we invest in this is going to be crucial. Even once we identify the resources and raise it from the private sector, the campaign to which we're going to promote it is important, because that message you talked about of the trust and all of that is still something that has to be resolved. And that we don't have the answer to. And in fact, I'd engage your agency and your staff in helping us think through the right way to talk about that if it's already not part of the committee. The committee is made up of vast different sectors, but we've got a lot of work to do for that part.
Well, I think there's a greater fear too on some parts of the community to respond for a variety of reasons. So I know that's a concern. I know, Kina, you had something you wanted to.
Thank you, Madam President, Commissioner O'Grady, Commissioner Boyce. I just wanted to add that as part of the framework that the county and city have put together, these 30 subcommittees are chaired and co-chaired by subject matter experts and stakeholders that come from the various hard-to-count communities, and they all have action plans. So at our meeting on Monday, on last Wednesday, that was a major part of the meeting, was them reporting out their activities, their challenges, their opportunities, so that now we have 30 different action plans to reach out to the hard-to-count communities. And so the funding that we are hoping to put together will fund their activities going forward. Everything from general community meetings to putting messages on utility bills, brochures. We'll be creating a shared platform for communication so that we are aware of how, as you can imagine, with 30 subcommittees, there's a lot of work going on in the community. So attempting to stay organized and making sure that we're filling the gaps from incarcerated folks to formerly incarcerated folks, immigrants, is just a myriad of subcommittees that we have have gotten these action plans from. And as we continue this work, I will keep you all posted because we're looking forward to, this is our period of great activity. Just by way of reminder, Wednesday, April 1st is Census Day. And so starting in January, you'll see some great activation on much of this work that's been going on. Some folks have definitely already been in the community working this. I think coming out of our meeting on Wednesday, not only did we learn about the local activity that's going on, but the state and federal folks are also out there working very hard. Census workers will be needed. We are working with the faith-based community. So just a lot of activity going on, and so I would definitely keep you posted about that work and look forward to further conversations on it.
I think for our new American citizens, and thank you, Deputy County Administrator, as I'm thinking about this, I think for our new American citizen population, it will be a challenge. There are federal policies right now that are, at stay or at house, sitting somewhere that greatly impacts new American citizens where they may not even want to enter into our doors just because of lack of trust. So we're going to have to figure out, make a list of all those things and figure out how, because I know that, we have these best practice is in play, but I don't remember a time we've been here before.
And to your point, Director Bivens, that was a major thread that we heard about on Wednesday was the lack of trust. And so one of the things that we will be doing is making sure that we are having spokespeople who represent all the communities, and so they can build that trusted relationship. The African American subcommittee was specific about door-to-door canvassing should be done by people who look like the people that they're going out to talk with in order to build that trust and increase the trust. So that is a very important and very, very important piece, especially because the census will be taking place online for the most part, but the digital divide and gap still exist. If you don't complete it, then you'll get a phone call, you'll get a visit to your home, and so it's important that whoever is knocking on your door that is a trusted person, a person who on the other side can believe that they have their best interest at heart. So I appreciate that comment.
Anybody have anything else? Thank you all from the team of Job and Family Services. Thank you for the work you do day in and day out for the residents of Franklin County.
Thank you, Commissioners.
Thank you. We are adjourned.
Director, hold on. I've got several more questions for your agency thought of.